Hi, welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, I'm going to provide you a brief introduction to Microsoft Azure. So what is Microsoft Azure? Microsoft Azure is an ever-expanding set of cloud services to help your organization meet your business challenges. There are over 100 end-to-end services are available. For example, Azure App Services, virtual machines, virtual network, load balancers, application gateway, and so on. And almost on a monthly basis, Microsoft keep on adding new services also. Okay. And secondly, in terms of the spread, Microsoft spread across 54 global Azure regions. 42 are currently available and 12 are in pipeline. And in terms of compliance offerings, there are over 70 compliance offerings from Microsoft Azure in security, data, government, industry-wise offerings, and so on, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And in terms of Microsoft Azure usage, 90% of Fortune 500 companies are using Microsoft Cloud. There is a small catch here. When Microsoft says Microsoft Cloud, it does include Office 365, Azure, and Dynamics 365 also. However, there are many Fortune 500 companies are fastly adopting Microsoft Azure. And just like any other cloud computing provider, most of the services that are available in Azure will be charged based on the usage. Okay, so let me give you a very quick glimpse of 100 end-to-end services, regions, and compliance offerings. So here are the regions. We have 54. Most of them are present in US, Europe, China, India, and Australia. There are some regions available in South America also, which is Brazil South. And there are few regions that are coming up in South Africa and also UAE. Okay. And in terms of compliance offerings, you can see here there are a number of compliance offerings that are offered by Microsoft in Azure area. So you have global offerings, all the ISO related compliance offerings. We have government specific and we have industry specific and also regional specific. So for example, EU has GDPR, which is a new data regulation that came into force. So there is a compliance offering from Microsoft related to that. And in terms of services, you can see there are lots of services are available, categorized into compute, storage, security, networking, mobile, migration, and so on. So you can go through it and click on it and start learning about it. I'm going to place these links in the resource section of this lecture. Have a read through and gain a basic understanding of these services. And in terms of learning Azure, first thing you need to understand is the basics of Azure, i.e. how Azure internally works. It is extremely important for you to understand those internal workings so that you can design your services on Azure effectively with high availability, data residency, resilience, and all those stuff. So it is very important to understand the inner workings of Azure. So let me take you through that. Microsoft Azure is based on virtualization concept. So like any virtualized data center, it will contain racks. Each rack will have its own power unit and network switch. And also each rack will have a piece of software called Fabric Controller. This Fabric Controller is a distributed application that is responsible for managing and monitoring of servers within that rack. So in case if any server fails, then the Fabric Controller recognizes it and heals it. And each of these Fabric Controller is in turn connected to a piece of software called Orchestrator. This orchestrator includes web services, REST APIs in order to create resources, delete resources, and all those stuff. Okay. So basically, when a request is made by the user, either using PowerShell or Azure portal, firstly, it will go to the orchestrator. Orchestrator will fundamentally do three things. Firstly, it will authenticate the user. Secondly, it will authorize the user, i.e. it will check whether the user is allowed to do that particular task. And finally, it will look into the database for the availability of space based on the resource basically and pass the request to an appropriate Azure Fabric Controller in order to execute the request. So that is how it will happen. So the request will come to Orchestrator. Orchestrator will do basic checks and Orchestrator based on the availability will pass on the request to a particular Azure Fabric Controller and Azure Fabric Controller will allocate the server capacity. And several racks like this will become a cluster and you can have multiple clusters within a data center and you can have multiple data center within an availability zone, and you can have multiple availability zone within a region, and you can have multiple regions within a geography. So that is how everything set up within Azure. Okay. Just let me take you through a bit more on the terminology. Geographies. A geography is a discrete market typically contain 2 or more regions that preserves data residency and compliance boundaries. And secondly, regions. A region is a set of data centers deployed within a latency defined parameter and connected through a dedicated regional low latency network. So basically any services within region can communicate using that low latency network. So if you have 2 components that forms part of a solution, make sure they are deployed within the region if the connectivity between these 2 components is critical for business basically. Okay. However, one thing you need to be careful is some of the products won't be available in some regions. Generally, when a new product is released, they are available in US and then Europe and then slowly spread across the world. Okay. So make sure you check the availability of a particular service by region. And finally, availability zones. Availability zones are physically separate location within an Azure region. Each availability zone is made up of 1 or more data centers equipped with independent power, cooling, and networking. Okay, so how we can use all these 3 together to deliver a high availability solution? Let me show you that. So you can achieve full resiliency within the data residency by using geography as your data boundary, and by using regions as your DR, and by using availability zones for high availability. Okay, geography in terms of defining the data residency boundary, regions in terms of defining your DR, RTO, RPO, empty pod, and all those stuff. And in terms of high availability within the region, use availability zones. Okay, so that's it for this lecture. In this lecture, I talked about Microsoft Azure and also how Azure works internally. And we learned about geographies, regions, and availability zones. In the next lecture, I'm going to talk about how Azure resources are organized. Okay, so we covered at a level how Azure works. Now we are going to cover at a bit lower level. Once it comes to the resources level, how the resources are organized. Okay, it's going to be a very good lecture. If you have some time, join me in the next lecture.